ready for the Bob Graham Experience.
Hi, it's Bob Graham with Spear Point Inc. And we're about to share with you an interview I did with Alex Hristov. And he's got quite a story to share. He's going to talk about a personal experience that is so parallel to an entrepreneur's journey, the journey of a small business owner. And so as you listen to his story and how he tackles it, we're going to talk about at the end how it fits together. But I'm telling you, it's a great lesson for all of us. He also talks about some really detailed, really important psychological aspects of how to operate a business. So I hope you'll pay close attention. This is one you're not going to want to miss. So let's get started. Okay, Alex, I am really excited to hear your story. You gave me the abbreviated version the other day. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me how you got to the place you are right now and what that place is.
Let's start at the beginning. Well, where I am now is I'm a coach. I coach wellness and confidence, along with whatever a particular client may be dealing with at the time, whether it's a career change, relationships, all the gamut of what people face in life. How I got here, let's start about 17 years ago. So I was the average guy, college degree, well employed. I was a software engineer at careerbuilder.com. Some of your listeners may or may not remember that company. At the time, it was the biggest online recruiter in the world. So everything was cool, standard, standard life, I guess. Got married. We were talking about having kids, starting a family, yada, yada, yada. The problem is that over the years, I started experiencing very strange symptoms. I'd get lightheaded for no reason. I'd get dizzy. I would have these weird moments where I would, for example, turn my head, and I would be missing the actual transition. So one moment I'm looking straight forward, the next moment I'm looking sideways, but the transition between the two is missing. Very unnerving, because all of a sudden you find yourself in a completely different place, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And have to very quickly figure out, where am I, what's going on. As the years went on, this became more and more prevalent. Started going to doctors, went through endless tests and scans and yada, yada, yada. And everybody told me there's nothing wrong with you. It's in your head. It's your anxiety.
Were you an anxious person at that time? Were you having unusual stress or, anything that, because I'm asking because I know people are asking.
Yep. I started having anxiety the summer between high school and college. I assume it came from the fact that it was a, relatively big transition in life.
Sure.
That's what I'm guessing. I don't really remember anymore. I mean, that was,
okay.
20 plus years ago. So I started having anxiety. I had, I'm a very practical person, right? So at the time, this was roughly 1998, let's say. No, actually, it was
and an engineer, right?
Yes.
So you come at it from that perspective as well.
I deal with everything that way because I don't know what else to do.
Define that way, because you say that way, and some people may not be familiar with what an engineer's mindset might be.
Basically, it's about logic. It's the scientific way. It is facts-based, right? So I don't. I'll explain it to you by giving you an example of a client I work with.
Okay.
I had a client who came to me and said, "Well, I have writer's block. I'm the furthest thing from a writer. I'm terrible at telling stories. It's just not my thing, right? At all. So my first instinct is, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to help this person? And so the only thing I can do is the engineering / science way, which is we don't imagine great things. We don't imagine happy things. We don't make up solutions that just make us feel good. We dig into the problem, right? I'm a software engineer, but the engineering way is it's the same across all engineering disciplines. So if I'm designing a bridge, right, I don't get to come up with a solution that makes me feel good. I have to know that it's not going to fall, right? It's going to withstand whatever traffic and weather conditions and whatever else comes its way. It has to be solid, right? So I have to deal purely with facts. So that's in essence the engineering way. So this example of this person with the writer's block, right? Instead of sending her off on a spiritual journey to the Himalayas, I started digging in, right? Tell me what happens when you sit down to write. Well, I sit down to write and it's like there's a handbrake, a mental handbrake. I can't write. Okay. Can you tell me about the story? Well, the story is roughly this and that and the other. Okay, so let's go through the handbrake. What makes you stop when you sit down to write? Well, I'll come up with these great ideas, and then I have to change everything in the book. I have to change everything else, right? And right there, I'm like, okay, thank you. You just gave me the answer. Because what you're doing is, if you're having ideas that are changing everything else, you're in essence writing an infinite number of books, right? You're not writing one book. There's just way too many variables. Nobody can do that. So, do you know how the story starts? Yes. Do you know how it ends? Yes. Do you know roughly what happens in the middle? Yes. Okay. So those are going to be constants. If you sit down and you have an idea that requires all those to change, that's an idea for a different book. So write down those constants and they can change. And her reply was, well, in writing, they call that writing an outline, and I never wanted to do one. And I said, well, if you want to write this book, you got to write an outline. So
I'm biting my lip because as you know, I help people with writing books for their businesses, and I've taught thousands of college students, and I hear about writer's block every time. Oh, I've got writer's block, and I don't believe it exists. I believe it's much like what you said. It's just they haven't thought it through enough.
Correct.
To be ready to write. You've approached it a different way. You say outlining. I don't outline myself much anymore because I've done it enough.
Yeah, you're used to the
some
process.
sort of structure.
Yep.
So it's interesting how we both reach the same conclusion differently, and I like that. That's really great. So I'm sorry I cut you off on your story. So let me recap so I make sure I understand this where we are right now.
Yep.
You've been having these symptoms for a couple years, unexplained and debilitating in the moment, not like you weren't completely not able to function. It sounds like it was sporadic because...
Well, so the whole thing took roughly 10 years from when these symptoms started to what I call the end of my previous life.
Okay.
And, slowly over the years, things got worse. Kept going to doctors. I kept working. I got to the point where really the only thing I could do was work. Because the symptoms were so debilitating, I put all my effort into staying employed.
Okay.
And I'd get home and I just crash. Right? I didn't have the energy to go out. I didn't have the energy to go on vacations, to do anything fun. So naturally, that started affecting my marriage.
Sure.
By 2017, things were bad enough where I could no longer work. And by that time, my family and my ex-wife had come to the conclusion that I'm a hypochondriac.
Okay.
That didn't fit into her her, meaning my ex-wife, it didn't fit into her definition of living life. So the marriage ended.
Okay.
And I ended up, because I was physically so bad by this point, I had difficulties with very basic things. I couldn't get in the car and go to the grocery store to buy myself food. I couldn't stand for half an hour to prepare my food and, stand in front of the oven and just basic things like that. So I ended up moving to my parents' house.
You're at what age when you're moving to your parents' house?
I was 40 or 41.
Okay, not the ideal situation.
Not the ideal situation, right? I went from middle class, somewhere between middle class and upper middle class. My ex and I, we were both engineers. We were, both had good incomes. So I went from a man in my prime with a good job, good income, to moving into a room in my parents' house, no longer able to work, marriage ended, no longer able to really go out and do anything. So for all intents and purposes, complete and total loss of life. Other than being alive, I lost my life.
Okay.
So the first thing I had to do, because things got very dark very quickly. I mean, completely cut off from society. My friends at the time had no idea what I was going through. There's no way they could. And so I had no one to relate to in any way. And I was basically completely alone. Obviously my parents were there, but they didn't get it. They for many years they stayed with the belief that I was a hypochondriac because, again, all the doctors say there's nothing wrong with you, yada yada. So pretty much alone, cut off from humanity. And the first thing I had to do was figure out how to stay sane. And I tried various things. Kind of what I call my Bible now is a book that was suggested in a support group online. The book is called The Brain That Changes Itself. It was, for me, kind of difficult reading. I found that a bit dry, and it took some work to get through it. But the concept.
You're an engineer. It should be easy for you.
I mean, yes and no, right? Because to me, a book is a story. I want the story to be interesting.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this book, yes, there are interesting things because there are real world examples of people who have gone through great difficulties and what they did to overcome them. So there are very interesting stories, but a lot of it is very medically thick, I guess.
Okay.
Which is, that in
Chemicals
itself
and neuroscience and how the body interacts.
Correct.
Yep.
So that in itself is not so much of a story, right? It's almost like a college lesson.
Okay.
So you kind of have to work through it. So anyway, read the book and thought to myself, all right, there are ways, obviously, that I can change how my mind functions and how my body functions. So how do I leverage that? And this is coming from somebody who I knew nothing about psychology before that. Again, I'm an engineer, right? So knew nothing about psychology. These were all very foreign things to me. So I had to kind of bumble my way through it. but the goal was, I need to figure out, first of all, how to stay sane. And to stay sane, I have to have some hope. Things were so dire at the time. I was physically so, I don't know what the word is. Things were so bad, I had to, there were times where I crawled to the bathroom. I couldn't stand and walk. I had to crawl. There were many times where my parents had to bring me food to bed. I couldn't get out of bed. Just various difficulties like that. I couldn't sleep for more than an hour at a time, if that. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours total in a 24-hour period. I was in constant, very intense pain in my neck specifically. And by the way, I'll get to what the actual problem was, just so it's not this weird nebulous thing.
And Alex, can I pause you for a moment? It
Sure.
occurred to me as you were saying that, and I don't want to overstate or minimize what you went through.
Yeah.
But what you described is very similar to the entrepreneur's journey.
As in?
As in, you have this thing you want to do. Very few people around you understand.
Yep.
You become isolated. You keep pursuing it, and people keep telling you you're nuts, you're nuts, you're nuts.
Yep.
And then you start to read about it. You start to look at books. You start to go to courses. You listen to people. You go to networking events, all those things. And then you're completely isolated. And you may have gone through some desperation where you don't have the money you thought you'd have.
Yeah.
And now, so does that sound... I don't want to minimize what you went through in any way, shape, or form, but the parallels to me as you were telling me that today just jumped out at me that this is not just a story of Alex and his journey. This is every entrepreneur's journey.
Correct. And that's ultimately the goal of me going through this story. And it's not just an entrepreneur's journey. It's actually a life journey.
No.
Right.
Right. I'm trying to focus on entrepreneurs and small business owners, but certainly it's true of a doctor, it's true of a teacher, it's true of anyone in any field, and also in our just normal life.
Correct. And really, my goal of telling this story is, well, how should I say this? I'm telling this story because people want to hear stories. My goal ultimately is to tell people how to get through difficult times.
Okay.
But people want to hear the story of how I came to this conclusion of this is how you get through things. This is how you accomplish things.
Okay.
Right. So obviously your podcast is mainly for small business owners. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately my goal today is to hopefully give something helpful to those small business owners. But again, to get to there, I have to tell this whole thing.
Keep going. I'm good.
So getting back to staying sane, having hope, I started trying different, at the time it wasn't that I had done any research on psychology or anything, or like figured out any methods. It was just me logically figuring out, how do I do this thing? And the first thing was, again, stay sane, have hope. And I started trying different things, and then I stumbled on a few that worked. Which at the time, my immediate thoughts were, wow, like what have I discovered? I've stumbled on something that's frankly awesome. So then the goal was to somehow get myself physically out of this situation. By this time, I had a pretty good idea that there was something wrong with my neck. And I started researching. How muscles work, how the nervous system works, Started researching about neurology. And eventually I came to a conclusion about what's wrong with me, or I came up with a theory. So I went to my doctor. I had been going to her for this issue for a decade. So luckily she had given up, which means she was willing to entertain me. So I said, okay, here's what I think it is. Here's what I need you to do. Which was shoot a bunch of steroids in the muscles in my neck. She said, okay, shot a bunch of steroids in me. And then I had some relief for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And as soon as I got that little bit of relief, right away I knew, okay, I know where the issue is. I know the area.
Mm-hmm.
Since the steroids worked, I can now deduce the problem to one of 2 or 3 things, which is if steroids work, it means there's inflammation there, right? So this is very much like the like the writer's block thing, right?
You also sound like an engineer.
Exactly.
Just so you know.
Exactly. It's a matter of give me the first piece of factual evidence so I can dig from there, right? So now that I know the problem is inflammation, the next question is where is the inflammation and what's causing it, all right? So started methodically working through those things. What I figured out was the following. My entire problem stems from a lower back injury from when I was much younger. I did the standard stupid thing that many of us do, which is you lift something heavy with your back, not your legs. So I screwed up my lower back. I was young and dumb, so I didn't bother doing the smart thing, which is, to start strengthening my core. Instead, I made the decision of, well, whenever this flares up, I'll go to the chiro, they'll fix me, and then I'll be fine. However, what that did is it forced me to have a very particular way I sat when I was at my computer. And because of the way I sat, it placed a lot of stress on my neck muscles. And again, I was a software engineer, so all my work was in front of a computer. Not only that, whenever I was done working, I was in the computer anyway. So these are relentless hours upon hours upon hours upon days and years of placing this stress on my neck. And what had happened was my neck muscles had become so tight that they were actually putting pressure on blood vessels, which is why I was getting lightheaded all the time.
Right.
Apparently I wasn't getting enough blood to my head. And they were also putting stress on a bunch of nerves in the neck, which in turn were getting inflamed. And once nerves get inflamed, all kinds of fun stuff happens. And by fun, I mean absolutely awful.
Okay.
The issue was it happened so slowly over such a long period of time that I never actually understood what happened, right? It wasn't like there was an accident, something clear where, oh, I was fine, then this happened, then I wasn't fine, right? That's very easy to pinpoint. Whereas this happened so slowly over such a long period of time, I never noticed it. Which I'm going to come back to that a little later.
Okay.
Specifically, I'll talk about motivation. This is very interesting.
Okay. The parallels to business are fascinating so far.
Yeah. So
now, what year was it when you made this discovery of what you thought caused this?
this was 2019 leading into 2020.
Okay, so you've been dealing with this for about 10 years?
The very first symptoms I had were 2007. So what is that, 13 years roughly?
Okay, all right.
And by this time I had been unemployed, and living in a room for 3 years.
Okay.
So, in other words, the engineering way, the scientific way, the logical way, right? It got me to retain my sanity, which it was very difficult. I mean, I had at some point completely disassociated from society, from everything, right? I could no longer conceptualize how you can walk out the door and meet your friends at a restaurant. You know, I went through what people, I guess, some people experience, but not many, which is you look in the mirror and you don't recognize the person, right? I would recognize the face. I know that that person existed once, and I know that that person was me. However, that person died at some point. I'm no longer them, so I don't actually know who I'm looking at in the mirror. So a lot of very weird stuff like that. I had stopped referring to people as people and started referring to people as humans, specifically to differentiate myself from everyone else. I got to tell you that this is going to sound awful, but actually, COVID was a very good time for me because all of a sudden, everyone else was forced to stay at home. And all of a sudden, I felt like I am normal because
Okay.
I'm not the only one basically imprisoned in a house.
Okay.
Anyway, moving back forward. That's a good way to put things. Moving back forward. Once I knew what the issue was, then I had to figure out how to undo it. Now, at some point, I had started suspecting my neck, and I had gone to physiotherapists, gone through all their exercises and things that had to be done, and actually all of it exacerbated my symptoms. So I stopped going. So I had to understand why that didn't work. So once again, start reading medical journals and whatever else I could find. Started understanding exactly how muscles work and how they function together with the nervous system, and started coming up with my own exercises, my own therapy, which was very difficult at times because if a particular exercise I came up with wasn't the right one, things can go south very badly. And, which is the last thing you want. When you're in hell, you don't want to go even further in hell. You know what I mean? It was also
I
very
think a
difficult.
lot of business owners can empathize with you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. The other very difficult thing, which again, it's not just business owners, it's just life.
Mm-hmm.
Another very difficult thing was that results came incredibly slowly. So I'd come up with a new exercise and I'd have to do it for, say, 3 months to see if there's any difference. Right? So, in essence, you do a bunch of research, you go, okay, I think this is the right way forward. This makes sense. Now I have to have faith that the conclusions I've come to are correct and slog through the whole thing. And I have to keep slogging through it because I may not get answers for months and months and months and months.
Sounds like marketing campaigns.
Oh, exactly.
Or website redevelopments.
Or any of it.
Writing a book.
Absolutely. Any of it. So, went through tons and tons of that. Still to this day. So I'm mostly okay now. But relatively 5 years of laying in bed, a lot of things go south. So I've been, quote unquote, rebuilding my body for 2 years now.
Okay.
I'm pretty healthy, pretty fit, but it's still easy for me to injure myself. I still have pains all over. But again, it's that same mentality of, okay, what did I, in my particular case, it's because so it always comes down to, what did I do wrong? What do I have to fix? Right? Because everything we're doing, naturally, we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. So you have to constantly reevaluate, where did I screw up? And how do I undo the screw up? And what do I do different next time? Right? So you want to talk about marketing. Okay, well, in a way, this podcast right here we're doing, this is marketing, right? And when it's done and you and I hang up and I go downstairs to eat, I'm going to start thinking through, what did I say today? How did I say it? Did I say something dumb? Right?
Right.
In other words, take the
Usually that's my job.
Well, I do that with everything now. With everything. Right? What could have been done better? So, in terms of physically, again, it's still easy for me to injure myself. So then I have to go back. What did I overdo? Okay, that particular thing, it's usually some exercise I decide to do. And, I go gung-ho and I totally overdo it. And then it's like, oh my God, some muscle in my side hurts so bad that I can barely breathe. I can barely walk. Okay.
So you see a result. It causes you to take more action doing a lot of the same thing, and you might, I don't know, not do other things.
Correct.
So say you send an email and you got 5 responses in the first 5 minutes, you'd be like, oh, I've got to send another email tomorrow. And you just keep doing that. You might not do your other marketing. Or if you were, I don't know, writing at 5 a.m. one morning and you just hit a streak.
Yep.
And you just wrote beautifully from 5 a.m. till 9 a.m. You get up the next day and do it 5 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Yeah.
The downside of that is you burn out.
Correct. So everything is a constant iteration, right? Which, again, is very much the engineering way, right? You come up with a solution, you then have to test it.
Right.
And usually, so in other words, you're making prototypes. And then you're figuring out where it breaks, what doesn't work. You go and fix that part. Then you test again. You figure out what's wrong with it now in this new state. You go back and fix it, right? So it's you're constantly iterating. So the goal of this entire story, again, ultimately, I hope to help people. So understanding where I'm coming from, I would like to share the following things with people.
Okay.
And I should go back a little bit because, just to mention, once I started figuring these things out, I got very interested in why they work. And I started reading specifically a lot of psychology-related articles and books. And what I stumbled on is the fact that these methodologies I have come up with for myself are actually all cognitive reframing.
Which could apply to any situation where you are not having the results you would expect.
Well,
and this is what you're doing with your business now, I assume, right?
Correct. It's a core part of what I do. When I coach people, cognitive reframing is at the center of everything.
Can you define cognitive reframing? Because those are two big words.
Cognitive reframing is a fancy way of saying change your perspective.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example, and it fits perfectly with the very first step to improving your circumstances, whatever they may be, which is motivation, right? Everything has to start with motivation. And what people generally say is, well, yeah, I want things to be better, but I just don't have the motivation. And my question to them is, can you give me an example in life when you've been motivated? And the common answer is something like, Well, when the shit hits the fan, I get motivated. When I'm at a breaking point. So the cognitive reframing, i.e., the change in perspective that I give them is the following. Are you stressed financially? Are your relationships causing you stress? Is your job causing you stress? Is your health causing you stress? Is your lifestyle in any way causing you stress, right? If any of these things are causing you stress, the shit's already hit the fan. You just got used to living in it, so you don't see it. Going back to my neck, the reason they don't see it is because it happens so slowly over such a long period of time. Right? Because normally when people say, well, I'm motivated when I'm at a breaking point, there's an event.
Right.
Right? Everything was okay, then something happened, and now it's not okay.
Desperation spurs innovation, right?
Correct. So again, this is literally the same thing as what I went through with my neck. Right? If there was a quote unquote breaking point, if there was an accident and I could point to I was okay before this and after it I wasn't, right? I know what I'm dealing with. Whereas it happened so slowly over such a long period of time that I had no idea. And it's the same thing with motivation, right? If you're unhappy with any part of your life, if you're a small business owner and you're constantly bleeding money and you're barely making payroll and you're barely putting food on the table, right? The shit has already hit the fan. You probably didn't realize it because it happened so slowly over such a long period of time. Or you don't have the perspective of what it is to run a stable, profitable business. Right? This is the same thing with a lot of relationships. People aren't motivated to figure out how to be in a healthy relationship because they've never experienced one. They don't know what it is, right? So their point of reference is screwed up. They've only known bad relationships. So to them, that's the normal, right? And if we're talking about an abusive relationship, well, I'll change when I'm at a breaking point. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean you're getting regularly physically abused? Like, why would you want to wait for that? Right? I mean, that's an extreme situation now.
Right.
You should be motivated to change your circumstances way before an extreme situation comes up.
So let me spin this back to business a little bit.
Yep.
So motivation is key.
Yep.
And you help people figure out how to motivate themselves better, or you give them the tools so that walk me through what that looks like in a typical relationship for you with a client.
It's literally what I just told you. So I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not a fan of motivational speakers at all. Motivational speakers tell you a lot of very nice things. They tell you some stories and you walk out of there going, hell yeah. And then you go, okay, what now? Right? I'm not a fan of that. I would rather help you with the what now.
Okay.
But, I'm sorry, you got to bring your motivation. And my version of motivational speaking is again, it's cognitive reframing, right? It's giving you your situation, but in a different way. That different way being whatever parts of your life are causing you stress and unhappiness, that should be your motivation. Right? What are you waiting for? You're waiting for the breaking point. You're living in the breaking point. Right? And that tends to kind of light a fire under people's asses. I'll give them this and then I'll lay off, right? I've stuck in the knife. I don't want to now twist it. Right? And
Have you stuck in the knife, Alex, or when I'm helping people with writing books or coaching them on their business, I don't consider it sticking a knife in them as much as holding a mirror up to them and letting them see themselves from another perspective, because we tend to be
Correct.
stuck. If you think you have writer's block, you have writer's block until someone
Correct.
says, you wait a second, maybe it's something different. If someone's having, if they have bad marketing campaigns and they're spending money on ads that don't work and they're just spending it because all their friends told them to spend it,
Yep.
when you say to them
Yep.
things like, hey, what were the results you were expecting?
Yep.
How does this align with what you're doing? They tend to respond differently. So is it sticking the knife in really, or is
Well,
it just helping them see a
it's
broader perspective?
it's both.
Okay.
I call it sticking the knife because it can be painful, right? Looking in the mirror can be painful because, oh, I've screwed up, right? And here we go with another version of cognitive reframing, because the initial instinct is, oh, I've screwed up. Oh, I messed up yet again, blah, blah, blah. And the way to spin that, quote unquote, again, it's just cognitive reframing, is to look at it from a different perspective, which is not, oh, I've screwed up again. It's, aha, I understand where I'm going wrong. So now I can change course, right? But I call it sticking the knife in because
Okay.
initially it's uncomfortable for that person, right? So I'll give them a couple days to mull it over, and then I'll just send them a text. Hey, what do you think about what we talked about the other day? And generally the response is, you know what? You're so right. That lit a fire under my ass. Like, let's do this. Whatever it is we're talking about. Let's do this. Now they're motivated. So that's the extent of my version of motivation.
Okay.
Right? It's really very simple. If you're unhappy, why are you not doing something about it? Period.
Even if it's not the right thing, just anything, right?
Anything. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're unhappy, why are you okay with that situation?
Well, do you find, Alex, just to carry that a little further, I find a lot of people I talk to and myself at times, I'm comfortable in where I am now, and to go to another place can be uncomfortable. Like someone said to me over the weekend, I was talking about this podcast, and they were like, what if this reaches 1 million people? And at first I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. I really want to change all those people's lives. But then I'm like, oh my God, it's just 1 million people. The production values are going to have to be greater. I'm going to get different clothes. There's going to be a different set. And all those things spin through my head. And at that point, what would be exciting to reach 1 million people suddenly became very daunting to me, because I was going to have to become a different person
Yep.
in that newness. And I think we see
Yep.
that a lot of times,
course.
especially a small business owner who's come from working for a company,
Mm-hmm.
they see a hole and they say, okay, I'm going to go out and start my company, and
Yeah.
we're going to help them with their widget problem. And they're scared to death of success.
So that is managing change.
Okay.
There are several parts to change. Let's start with exactly what you're talking about, which is becoming a different person. Oh my God, who am I now? I'm losing my identity, right? The reality is, any change means what? It means we leave something behind. So there is a loss, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When we're talking about the individual, I'm changing, I'm becoming a different person. There is loss related with that because you're losing a part of yourself. However, that's the natural part of growth. How I like to deal with that particular loss when I'm going through that, right? When I am personally changing,
Mm-hmm. Which is every day, Alex, I hate
which
to tell you.
is every day. But when it's something that causes me stress, I've come up with a little exercise that seems to work, which is I get up in the morning, brush my teeth, put my clothes on. Before I go downstairs to feed my cats, I'll take a few minutes. I'll just stand in the room, close my eyes, and I'll think about the person that I'm leaving behind. In other words, the parts of me that I'm leaving behind. I'll think about those parts and I will simply thank them. Thank you for getting me to where I am now.
So can you give me an example of a part the last time you did this? I don't know if it was this morning or last week, but what would be a part that you let go of if you don't mind sharing?
Honestly, I don't even think of specific parts. I just think of myself as a whole, as the person I have been up to this point.
Okay.
You know, in essence, I'm paying respects to something I'm losing, which in this case is some version of myself.
And also a form of gratitude, right?
Exactly.
Which research is showing people who
Correct.
have, an attitude of gratitude, for want of a better
Correct.
phrase, tend
Absolutely.
to perform better.
Absolutely. So yeah.
And don't you think that's because we're shifting the idea of that loss to something that we've gained? When I'm thankful for something, so I'm thankful for that relationship that came to an end because I learned these lessons.
Exactly.
I'm thankful that my website didn't do really well for those 2 weeks when we ran a sale, because now I know don't run a sale these 2 weeks next year.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Again, cognitive reframing, the fancy term for looking at things from a different perspective, from a healthy perspective.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now this sounds really easy, Alex. Someone's going to be watching this, and going, "Oh, these guys, it's so easy for them. All they have to do is change." It's not easy in real time. And as you know, probably more than anyone, and I don't need to tell you, but when we're in the most desperate of times, it's often the hardest time to see the opportunity to be grateful. The hardest time to look for different perspectives.
Correct.
It's one of the challenges of being a human, I think, is the further you go in the pit, the further you go in the pit.
Yeah. So how I'll tell you how to go about it. Because yes, on the surface it sounds very easy. In reality, it's not. Okay? And I'm going to take a page out of politics. Politics, they are masters at psychology. Propaganda, regardless of where it's coming from and who it is, regardless of whether it's a propaganda you like or don't like. And by the way, this isn't just politics. This is marketing, right?
It's marketing, it's sales,
it's
sales. Persuasion.
Exactly. So it works in a very, very simple way. And you can apply this to yourself to reframe the way you think about things.
Okay, I'm ready.
And what is this simple, magical truth? Repetition. Repetition, right? So we've all heard the fact that if you tell a lie 100 times, it becomes the truth. The difference is, I'll say it in a slightly nasty way. What we're really doing is gaslighting ourselves. However, hear me out. I see.
Okay, all right.
Hear me out. The key is we're gaslighting ourselves with facts, which is not so much gaslighting ourselves, right? It's actually, again, reframing. It's substituting negative thought patterns with positive ones. For example, if we're talking about confidence, I used to struggle with imposter syndrome. I struggle with that while being at the same company for a decade, Working my way from a junior developer to engineering lead, right? I had four, I'm missing the word, four promotions. So during those 10 years, I had four promotions and I tripled my salary. This is all in the same company. However, the entire time I felt like a fraud. I don't know what I'm doing. Everybody around me is much smarter. They know more than I do. I'm just bumbling my way through this. I can't believe they haven't figured me out yet. Sooner or later they will, and I'm toast. The cognitive reframing, the way we substitute those negative thought patterns with positive ones, is looking at the facts. The facts are, as they say, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. In other words, for example, it was common for me to be in a meeting with the CTO or the CEO. It wasn't just, I hate to use this term, but it wasn't just the common soldier, right? I
It was the C-suite.
Correct, right? So I had regular interaction with people in various positions, in various levels of the hierarchy, and apparently nobody thought I was a hack. So how do I get out of this imposter syndrome? Well, I start reminding myself regularly that obviously I'm doing something right, or I wouldn't have made it this long. I start thinking back on the projects I've done, right? I start thinking back on the interesting things I've figured out, on the solutions I've come up with, on the sheer volume of time I have spent on a particular project, on the impact of projects I've worked on, mission critical, with, multiple stakeholders, right? So what you're doing is, again, in a way, gaslighting yourself, but you're doing it with facts. And now we go back to, all of this stuff sounds easy, but it's not. Well, the key is the repetition. I don't just once tell myself, I've been here a decade and I still haven't been fired, so that must mean I'm great. No, this is a regular thing.
Okay.
Right? It's regularly saying to myself, you know what? Look at all this stuff I've accomplished. Obviously, I know what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm competent. So this idea of I'm a hack, I'm a fake, it's bullshit. And it's practice, man. It's repetition. And what ends up happening with enough repetition of those kinds of, again, there's a million terms, right? There's cognitive reframing. There is replacing negative thought patterns with positive ones, yada, yada, yada. What happens when you do that regularly is you start catching yourself immediately. As soon as that negative thought comes up, you get to a point where you're no longer even willing to entertain it.
Right.
Like, you literally move on in that instant. Because that thought comes in and you go, you know what? You're useless to me.
Right. You, the thought.
You, the thought.
Yes.
You're doing nothing for me and you're bullshit.
Okay.
Right? You are not factually correct. So, like everything in life, it's repetition. Right? So when going back to change, when you're dealing with these changes, changing who you are, when you do your little exercises, which again for me is reflecting on the person that has brought me up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that enough, you eventually don't need to do it anymore. You're okay with it. You're like, yeah, that dude that I left behind, he rocks because he got me to here. You know what I mean? So So you're changing your perspective on things. You're changing it in a positive way that helps you.
Okay.
And so another way to look at it, let's imagine I, Alex Hristov, a coach with a business, superself.me, all my life have grabbed hot pots and pans with my bare hands. And every single time I have burnt myself. And one day I wake up and I'm like, I'm fed up with burning myself. And I go out and I buy oven mitts. Right? All of a sudden, I am, quote unquote, no longer the same person. I am, a lot of pop psychology talks about being authentic. Well, authentic doesn't mean don't change. It means be okay with who you are right now. Right?
Okay.
So that means right now, as of this moment, I am an Alex who uses oven mitts. Right?
I like this.
I have in no way compromised myself. Right? I am no longer not authentic to myself. I just got smarter. I'm using oven mitts and not burning my hands.
Okay. I like this. So tell me this, Alex, what can we do to help you today? Tell us how we can get in touch with you, who your ideal client is, and anything else that we can do to help you. And then after that, we're going to do my favorite part of this, which is the Bob Graham experience. 5 questions that you're going to answer really quickly. So the stage is yours now for a couple moments.
Pop quiz. I am very easy to get to. Just go to superself.me.
Superself.me.
Yep.
Okay.
That's my website.
superself.me.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's my website.
Who's your ideal client or customer?
I have recently focused more and more on wellness.
Okay.
Everything starts with feeling well and thinking, quote unquote, well.
Okay.
I focus on physical exercise. When you exercise, your brain starts generating all kinds of really good stuff.
Yep.
Dopamine, serotonin, everything. It helps you be happy. It helps you feel good. It helps you become confident. It also starts giving you something you can hang your hat on in terms of accomplishments, right? Holy crap, last month I walked 20 miles. What the F? Like, I actually did that, right?
Okay.
It allows you to face challenges and fears because all of a sudden you're going, well, hold on. Obviously, I'm able to accomplish things. I'm able to put in the work, right? Again, cognitive reframing, we need to lean on our accomplishments.
Okay.
So exercise is very important. Cognitive reframing is very important. In addition to that, I help people with whatever their current challenges may be. Okay.
Well, you're about to have a positive experience, I hope, as I ask you the 5 questions for the Bob Graham experience. Are you ready, Alex?
Awesome. Stick the knife in.
Question number 1. What's the last thing you read?
The last thing I've read is, I don't remember which one. It's one of the books in the Last Kingdom series.
Okay. All right. Nice. What's your most important inspiration, or who is your most important inspiration?
It's not a specific who. I get my inspiration from stories of personal triumphs. Normal people overcoming their circumstances, doing something positive with their lives.
Okay. Nice. What's your biggest daily challenge?
Ooh, this is a difficult one. Honestly, right now, it's still a lot of pain that I deal with.
Okay. All right.
It makes it, there are days when it's very difficult to do my normal exercise regimen. There are days when it's very difficult to wash the dishes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. All
That's
right.
okay. Thank you. It is what it is.
I appreciate the honesty. Next question. What's your guiding principle?
Do good.
Do good.
Period.
Okay. And what's a skill you didn't know you had that you rely on now?
Ooh, this is difficult.
That's why it's the Bob Graham experience. If it were easy, it wouldn't be me.
Well, as of this very moment, I wasn't sure that I would be able to do what I consider a good interview.
Okay.
But it seems like I might be all right at it. I don't know.
I think you're good. All right, now I'm going to ask a bonus question.
Okay.
What's one book you would recommend everyone read?
The Brain That Changes Itself.
The Brain That Changes Itself. Who's the author?
Honestly, I don't remember. He's an MD.
Okay, I will put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes.
Maybe you should start a book club for people who read that book.
During those 5 years in hell, literally the only thing I could do was listen to books.
Okay.
And I have booked myself out, and I want nothing to do with books anymore.
Okay.
There's a lot of trauma involved with listening to books. It's a heavy reminder to a very dark time.
Okay, fair enough.
I do not recommend people to not read books. I just simply cannot do it anymore. Maybe in another 10 years, I'll be open to it again. But right now, it's very difficult. It's a dark reminder.
Okay, well, I've got good news for you, Alex. You survived the Bob Graham experience, so congratulations on that.
Woo.
And I would tell you that you did a great interview. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your willingness to share it and be vulnerable with us. And I think there are a lot of really good life lessons, business lessons, and lessons in terms of how we approach our minds. And that's the key to all of this, right? If you can think it, you can be it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, folks. We will be back with another episode real soon. People like Alex, if you're someone like Alex or someone who's got a great story to tell about your business, or you just wanted to enjoy the Bob Graham experience, let me know. You can find me in the show notes. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks
Bob. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was the Bob Graham Experience. Want to be a guest and experience it for yourself? Visit thebobgrahamexperience.com to get on the list. And of course, please rate us and listen to other episodes wherever you had the Bob Graham Experience. Until next time.